وأصحابه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. Alhamdulillah, with the abundant mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are gathered here again for another beneficial and amazing session of IPD on the topic Music Industry and Mass Control, Part 2, the continuation of the last session. I would like to welcome Sister Atiba for the introduction talk. Over to you, Sister.
Am I audible?
Yes, Alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. I welcome all of you, my brothers and sisters, to our today's session, which is basically a continuation of the last session, Music Industry and Mass Control. Brother Wafi exposed the dark side of music industry through the eyes of psychology. He explained very beautifully that how music affects us physiologically and psychologically. It was very informative and interesting session. We come to know many theories, facts that proved how music affects brain to great extent. This is a serious illness of our young generation. It's full of filth. Music affects the limbic system, which regulates our emotion. It can alter the learning and thinking, heart rate, and many more. It has huge negative effect. Inshallah, today we will learn it more, and especially we will come to know more about the effect of music on children, inshallah. So may Allah help us to protect all of us from harmness of music industry. May Allah help us and succeed us both in the world and hereafter, and make all of us companions of Jannah. Purify your intention. Keep your videos and mic off. Open your ear, eyes, heart, and notebook open with pen, and try to avoid anything that distracts you, especially of the social media notifications. Without taking more time, I would like to call Brother Wafi. Over to you, brother. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. قال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم بعد أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ومن الناس من يشتري لهو الحديث ليضل عن سبيل الله بغير علم ويتخذها هزوا أولئك لهم عذاب مهين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. So we are continuing with the topic we have been discussing from the last session, and that is the topic of music. I've been covering this topic from the perspective of psychology and psychiatry, mostly focusing on neuroscience. So we have covered a lot of neuroscientific studies which clearly prove that exposing ourselves to music will have its own consequences. We have clearly scientifically proved it with a lot of reports and with a lot of studies and with a lot of researches. Now today we are going to be continuing with two important topics, and as I mentioned earlier, we'll not be able to talk about all the topics. There are multiple topics such as suicides among youth and its relationship with the music industry, how music industry is used by certain multinational corporations with their own agendas. So there are a lot of aspects to this particular topic which we will not get time to discuss because of how huge the topic is. But today what we're primarily going to be focusing on is the effect of music on children and a concept called as subliminal messaging. Now subliminal messaging is a topic on psychology. We'll be going or swiftly moving through that topic by not using a lot of psychological terminology, so that we keep the topic explanation very, very simple. But before that, let me give you a few disclaimers, and number one is to purify your intentions. All right, purify your intentions. Make sure you're sitting in the class for the right intentions. And number two, make sure you have a notebook and a pen with you. How many of you have a notebook and a pen with you? Say yes. If you have a notebook and a pen with you, say yes in the chat. And as I always mention, before the starting of all the sessions that I take, I usually ask a lot of questions. I interact a lot. And this is actually for your own benefit. The more you interact, the more you are involved in the sessions, the more output you get from the sessions. All right. And finally, one more, or the last disclaimer I would like to give is, I have actually taken a few news reports, and these news reports can be quite disturbing. All right. There are cases of suicides. There are cases of murders. There are cases, that will actually, disturb a normal person. So I'm just giving a disclaimer. If there are people who get, anxious or who get stressed very fast, it'll be a good idea to leave the session now. Or, you could sit until, we're covering the general portions. But when we get to the, portion where we're discussing these news reports of how music industry has taken control over the life of some people or some children, and how it has led them to kill their own family members. And I'll be quoting you the clear studies proving that. And we'll discuss that in a bit more depth as time allows, inshallah. So if the general instructions are clear, say yes in the chat. If the general instructions are clear, say yes in the chat. All right, so Bismillah. With that, we are starting with a very, very important question. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be starting with the topic of music and its effect on children, right? The first question I would like to ask you is this: has children become more rebellious to elders when compared to the past? I mean, just comparing 30 years ago, 40 years ago, has children become more rebellious to their parents? They talk back to their parents more. They impulsively respond. They have no respect for their parents. Now, this is actually not a general, observation, but this is a scientific observation. It has been recorded and researched by multiple psychologists in different international universities across the world. We'll be covering this, researchers with its own references, inshallah. But when we look into history, we clearly see a huge change in the trend. And the trend is that respect for elders, respect for traditions has decreased a lot, without a question. Without a question. So we need to ask ourselves, how did this rebelliousness or increase of rebelliousness become apparent? What was the reason? What was the reason, and what are its consequences? Now, psychologically speaking, there might be a lot of different reasons. Let me ask you, what do you think are some of the reasons? What do you think are some of the reasons for rebelliousness to increase in the children? Type your answers in the chat. Okay, we have social media. Yes, that's a very important reason. Screen time has increased very clearly. Pornography industry, yes. Friends, very good. Lack of family interaction, that is also very clear. Children are taking elders for granted, yes, very clearly. Overcare, yes, that's also a very good point. Some, children are pampered, right? Nuclear families, yes, that also plays a huge role. Modern progressive ideologies, exactly, yes. Self-entitlement, yes. Dysfunctional family. So we have got multiple reasons. And if you're going to be touching on a few reasons today, inshallah. But before that, have you ever heard about the teenage liberation movement that happened in the United States? The teenage liberation movement that happened in the United States. We'll be touching on that topic as well, but that topic basically falls under sociology, anthropology, and politics. I've actually prepared another, presentation to cover that topic, but we will not be able to cover all the topics today. But I'll just be touching on that topic by, introducing what the teenage liberation movement is as well. Now, there is actually a huge role for music in the rebellion of youth against parents. Music, whether from radio recordings, is a popular form of entertainment for young people. And it has been shown that youth between ages of 11 and 13 spent 11.2 hours per week. And teenagers from 14 to 18 years old spent about 9.3 hours per week listening to music on radio, CD, or various resources of media. Now, this is actually a report done by Dr. Roberts and a few other psychologists. But the interesting thing here is this research was published in 1999. So what do you think? Do you think the number of hours would have decreased or increased? So this report is from 1999. So when we look now, do you think it would have increased or decreased? Obviously, right? Increased, of course. It has increased. In 1999, like if you need to listen to music, like you would have to have, certain devices for it. But today, every single guy, like every single girl, every single small child has, the mobile phone, the smartphone with them. And like, what does it take? Just plugging in the earphones and just listening. That is why we call music the plug-in drug. The plug-in drug. It's very easy to take in the drug. You just plug in and just play your song of choice, your song of choice. So it has already, like we have already seen that it is increasing day by day. And in the future, there is a high possibility that it might reach a saturation level. Now, parents may perceive it to be very innocent. A lot of parents, they buy the smartphones for little children and they think, come on, like what is a big deal with it? I mean, these are children and they're just doing childish things. They're supposed to be enjoying their time. This is not the time to be serious with life, etc. They give a lot of justifications. All right. And a lot of these parents, they really don't know the effect that these smartphones have on children, right? This is majorly due to, the generation gap. The generation gap. A lot of children today, they know 10 times more about technology than their parents. True or not? True or not? Compared to your grandparents and compared to the children today, who knows more? The children. Like they know a lot of things about technology than their own parents, right? Now, a lot of parents, they think that, all the things that their children are doing on the smartphones, like it's going to be innocent stuff. Maybe, just playing games. And they will ask, what is a big deal with playing games? Or, watching certain, movie shows or certain things or, watching cartoons, etc. A lot of parents think that it's completely innocent. It's completely innocent. It's very surprising. It's very surprising when we see certain counseling cases, especially with regards to pornography addiction. When children come, with this, when parents come with the problem that their children are, watching explicit or unwanted stuff. And when we talk to the children, their parents will never accept the fact that my child has been doing this for such a long time. Because a lot of parents, they have this, bias for their own children. They think that their children are innocent. They think that their children will never involve, in these types of stuffs, etc. Now, it is very understandable because parents will, obviously have a soft spot for the children, right? So it is also, a sign of parental mercy. But at the same time, if the parental mercy is not attached to wisdom, if it is not attached to the current updates and upgrades going on in the society, especially with regards to technology, it can be really, really problematic. It can be really, really problematic. Now, unknown to parents, music has deep psychological implications on children and teenagers. Music makes the children rebellious to their parents. Music makes the children rebellious to the parents. Let me ask you, is this true or not? So I've just given you a statement. I've not given you any evidence, any dalil, any proofs for it. But from a general perspective, let me ask you, does music make children rebellious to the parents? From your observation? Okay, so the answer seems a bit unanimous. Some are saying yes, some are saying sometimes. All right. Now for this, we'll need to analyze the music industry. And in the music industry, are most songs that are being released today, are they talking about positive messages or negative messages? Are they talking about positive messages or negative messages? Clearly negative. It's very, very clearly negative. The reports on this, it's very clear. More than 95% of the songs being released today have contents that are extremely explicit. We'll talk about these research reports now, inshallah. So in the 1989 issue of the Journal of American Medical Association, physicians Elizabeth Brown, MD, and William Hendy noted that most teenagers listen to music in the privacy of their homes and interpret on their own the ideas presented in the music without any guidance from elders. without any guidance from elders. Now, the teenage years are actually the years in which the teenagers begin to develop standards of behavior and morality in light of the morality of the standards, in light of the morality standards of their adults. So they basically try to gain or acquire information from their environment. If they are listening to music constantly, they will deduce certain messages, they will deduce certain normative standards from the music that they are listening to, consciously or unconsciously. Consciously or unconsciously. Brown and Hendy argue that in this context, music is a powerful medium in the lives of adolescents, offers conflicting values. The explicit sexual and violent lyrics of some forms of music often clash with the themes of abstinence and rational behavior promoted by adult society. So most of the music that we have today actually goes against traditional values, it goes against religious values, it goes against ethics, and it goes against morality. Very clearly, very clearly. Professor Alan Bloom. Now, for a student who's doing research in psychology or sociology, they would have obviously heard about Professor Alan Bloom, a very famous, a very well-renowned person. Professor Alan Bloom writes, those students do not have books, they most emphatically do have music. Nothing is more singular about this generation than its addiction to music. It's from his book, The Closing of the American Mind. It's a beautiful book, and it actually shows how strange the American society has become. How strange the American society has become. And due to globalization, what America does, what Europe does, do you think that is going to be followed by other nations? Do you think it's going to be followed by the United States of America? Sorry, by India, or by China, by Japan? Very clearly, very clearly. I mean, the trends of the United States of America become the global standards for fashion, become the global standards for how to live, how to eat, how to walk, how to talk, and how to live your life. It's an effect of globalization. It can also almost be called as neocolonization. American poet and author Robert Bly, in his book The Sibling Society, mentions that rock music of 1950s and 1960s played an important role in teenage liberation movement. So this is where we're going to be taking a small tangent. The teenage liberation movement. How many of you have heard about the teenage liberation movement? Say yes in the chat. If you haven't heard about it, say no in the chat. Now, presume students of sociology might have obviously heard about it, right? Might have obviously heard about it. The teenage liberation movement is actually quite profound when we learn about the trends of the teenage youth. There has been multiple books written on the teenage liberation movement. Some are positive and some are negative. From a liberal perspective, teenage liberation movement actually gave the teenagers a bit more strength for their rebellious behavior. It gave them access to, open sexuality. It said that going on dates is not a problem. Premarital relationships is not a problem. After, the teenage liberation movement, we actually see a huge change in social ethics. For example, I have a cousin who is right now in the United States, is actually studying in the high school. So he basically studied in the United States public high school system. And I asked him this question. I asked him, and he's, I think, 17 years old, if I remember correctly. For them, for a teenager of his age, if they don't go for dates, that is actually considered as wrong. It is considered as something problematic. Like they would ask, you're 17 years old, you're a virgin, you're 17 years old, and you never had sensual experiences, you're 17 years old and you have never been on a date. They would be surprised by that. But at the same time, before the teenage liberation movement, it was exactly the opposite. And the music industry played a huge role in the teenage liberation movement. The time when Elvis Presley, how many of you know Elvis Presley, the famous musician, Elvis Presley? Elvis Presley was considered as a king of music at his time. He was basically followed by millions and millions and millions of youth. They basically follow everything he does. That's how addictive his stuff was. But, ironically, he actually committed suicide. That's another topic. But then Robert Bly, he says, The popular heroes of the late 1950s, James Dean, Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, Jack Kerouac, all took part in the struggle to loosen everyone up and were loved for it. Subhanallah. Now, Robert Bly is arguing here that the rock music was one of the major factors which contributed towards the teenage liberation mentality. It is a fact that young people are the target audience of music industry, although people of all ages consume it. People of all ages consume it. It is very clear. It is very clear. Most of the songs and music videos and these general pop songs or there was actually a particular genre I forgot. The K-pop, yes, the K-pop. All of these songs that are being released today, it is actually targeting which category, which age category? Is it targeting the late 60s, or the people who have gone from their 50s? No, the teens, the youth, right? The youth, they're focusing on the youth. It's very clear. It's very clear. So the contents that they put in these songs are very clearly engineered. Towards a specific agenda, and I'll prove that to you within the few next slides, inshallah. So the amount of time young people spend listening to music is estimated at 6 hours a day. 6 hours a day. Imagine, a person who is listening to songs that contain sexual explicit content, a lot of swear words, a lot of immoral things. If they listen to it for 6 hours a day, whether they like it or not, is it going to have an effect on them? Is it going to have an effect on them? What do you think? Whether they like it or not, it is going to have an effect on them. It is going to have an effect on them. And this is where we come to the topic of subliminal messaging. We'll get to that as time allows. According to the Recording Industry Associations of America in 1986, sales of singles, LPs, CDs, and tapes exceeded $4 billion. The music purchases of young people between the ages of 10 and 19 accounted for over 30%. Over 30% of total sales. The purchase of music in other countries is following the same trend as seen in the United States, although at a lower pace. And this was in 1986. All right. Like, these are all old researches. What do you think? Has it increased or decreased? Has it increased or decreased? Any person with common sense who is not living in a cave, who knows what's happening in the society, will very clearly be able to say that it has increased. It has definitely increased. It has definitely increased. Now, the next question I would like to ask you is this. Have you seen parents, giving children phones, or digital devices to stop them from crying or to keep them busy? Like, imagine, the mother is working in the kitchen and the kid is crying. So the mother just takes the iPad and just gives the child, watch whatever you want, cartoons or, whatever, or some YouTube video. All right. Have you seen this? It's very common. It's very common. I would say that as a parent, this is probably one of the worst things you can do. It is one of the most immature and irresponsible thing you can do to your child. And a lot of parents, they don't even see like what these children are being exposed to. And these children, they watch this stuff like 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and 4 hours. And then, when they get into the teenagers, the children develop a lot of, abnormal symptoms. And then the, parents start complaining, subhanallah, subhanallah. The things that you do with your children, the things that you expose your children at a smaller age, at an earlier stage of life, it's definitely going to have an effect on them. It's definitely going to have an effect on them. Subhanallah. In today's society, children and youth are spending much more time by themselves in front of the electronic media because more and more mothers are working instead of spending time with the children. All right. Now, a question that I would like to ask you is this. All right. Is there a relationship between this particular statement and feminism? I asked this particular question to a few people too while I was reading Dr. Gohar Mushtaq's book. Is there a relationship between this and feminism? It very clearly does. It very clearly does. And this is all part of a corporate agenda, right? The more we study the waves of feminism and how it is intertwined with corporate agenda and how it is intertwined with colonialism, subhanallah, it becomes very, very clear. It becomes very, very clear. And a lot of you will be surprised to know this. I myself was a feminist. A lot of you will be surprised to know this. I was a feminist, and I used to think that feminism, stood for a lot of these, ideal values, like, everyone is supposed to be equal. We need to support, oppressed women, suppressed women. And I, very, innocently and naively believed the historical theory of patriarchy. I read these, feministic books, and that is how I used to think. Like, it was like at the earliest stage of my college. Okay, not now, not now. All right, like, it used to be at the earliest stage of my, college life. And then, later on, it became very clear to me. It became very clear to me how dangerous feminism is, how it is like a sociological cancer, a philosophical trap, a psychological poison today. Subhanallah. And I do remember very clearly, when I was reading Dr. Gohar Mushtaq's book, I particularly, took this as a screenshot and I posted it on my Instagram. And the next question I suddenly got was this. All right, it was a comment. You are patriarchal. You are misogynistic. You are a fanatic extremist. What is the problem with mothers going out and working? Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Like, if you do a proper study on this topic from a neutral perspective, without any prejudice or bias, like, you would very clearly see its effect. You would very clearly see its effect, inshallah. Maybe, at a later stage, if time allows, like, I will explain my journey from, feminism to anti-feminism. It's actually a quite interesting journey, because when I look at, a lot of the feminists today, I can relate with them. I know where they're coming from. I know what they're thinking, because I have went through their stages, right? Like, they're thinking that feminism is a movement of justice and supporting the oppressed and suppressed. Anyway, inshallah, that's a different topic. I think we have gone into another tangent here. We have gone to another tangent here. Anyway, according to Dr. Paul King, a foremost expert in the area of child and adolescent psychiatry, young people who do not identify with the traditional values of the society have to identify themselves with something. All youngsters seek a higher power authority that would approve what they are feeling and doing. In such conditions, music provides them with a justification and approval for their actions. So in teenage years, they're having a lot of these impulses. They're having a lot of these, desires and whims and fancies. Basically, the music industry provides a ventilation point for them. It's very clear. One school specialist with his vast experience in dealing with difficult children confirmed that the influence of music continued to surface in his counseling sessions with students. He mentioned time after time. This is very shocking, all right? This is very shocking. I dedicate this to all parents who still deny the effect of music on children, Time after time, I saw in them pattern their actions after the immoral behavior of their rock stars. I saw them pattern their actions after the immoral behavior of their rock stars. The kids showed up their allegiances by the vocabulary they picked up, the song titles printed on their book jackets, by the posters they hung on the walls of their rooms at home, by the music they listened to in their cars, and by the clothes they wore. So I want you to concentrate on this particular word, allegiance. They basically form this mental connection with their celebrity. Subhanallah, like I've seen a few counseling cases that really shocked me, like literally shocked me. It came from a K-pop addict, and this is a child. Like, she has been watching K-pop. Like, she very strongly follows this K-pop stars. She writes, status about the K-pop star. And she has this huge paragraph in her bedroom. She has the pictures of K-pop stars. Subhanallah. And they give really baseless justification. All right. They say, compared to other music, K-pop doesn't have this wild, vulgar language. Compared to other things, K-pop is much better, etc. Like, they give this baseless arguments without understanding that this definitely has an effect. The person singing, or the musician, the poet, or whoever is, moderating the entire message has a direct impact on our psyche. This is very clear. From a psychological perspective. Let me ask you, how many of you have seen K-pop addicts, people who are addicted to K-pop? This can mostly be seen, by them usually, having profiles of Korean language. They basically try to follow the Korean language. The same people are addicted to Korean drama. Subhanallah. Anyway, like, this is actually a very specific topic that needs to be dealt with. It is highly problematic. It's highly problematic. And when I say this, people sometimes think, you're being an extremist. No, I'm not being an extremist. If you're a person who follows psychology, who is connected with the youth, and you clearly understand the problems of the youth, you will clearly see how poisonous this stuff is, how poisonous this stuff is. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all from this filth. Protect us all from this filth. Let me ask you another thing. Even if you're listening to, a celebrity singing a good song, all right, imagine they're just singing, a song about nature. But do you think these celebrities, what kind of life are they leading? What kind of life are they leading? Right? Can you name a few, music stars of today? Can you name a few music stars of today? Type it in the chat. Name a few music stars of today. Okay, so we have Justin Bieber. Imagine Justin Bieber is singing, a song that has a positive message. All right. Justin Bieber himself being the person who's singing, it will directly have an impact. His moral normative framework is directly going to have a psychological impact. And what kind of a life does Justin Bieber live? Like, is he just, Sheikh Justin Bieber? Is he Maulana Justin Bieber going to pray 5 times a day and, doing the adhkar? No, right? No. Like the life he leads, like it definitely has a direct impact, right? And like when you listen to a song, you'll naturally get curious and to know like what his lifestyle is, what kind of things he does. And most of these celebrities, like they have had, drug issues, depression problems, a lot of these problems. Like it's very common in their life. I've basically compiled the names of the celebrities who committed suicide. If time allows, we'll get to that slide, inshallah. So sometimes the rebellion of youth against their parents does not remain limited to forsaking their parents in nursing homes, but some of the rebellious youth, in fact, kill their parents. Okay, this can be very shocking. This can be very shocking. And let me tell you this, like, this is specific cases. We should not generalize it. Every single child who is, listening to music doesn't mean like he's going to have such psychotic thoughts. But still, like a few cases will prove to us that there is a risk factor involved. There is a risk factor involved. This is an example, all right? So people who get disturbed fast, please exit from the session right now. Okay, for example, on January 9th, 1988, in the Jefferson Township of New Jersey, a youth named Thomas Sullivan Jr. murdered his mother, Betty Ann, in the basement of their house and set fire to his house in order to kill his father. And younger brother ran outside and committed suicide by cutting his wrists. His father woke up on time due to the sound of fire alarm and found his wife dead in a pool of blood in the basement of the house. The dead body of Thomas Sullivan was found in the backyard the next morning. Police later mentioned that Thomas was a talented student, outstanding sportsman, and belonged to the Boy Scouts. So, very normal, active guy. Then he became immersed in rock music. He was a fan of Ozzy Osbourne. Thomas's father told the police that all week before murdering his mother, his son Thomas had been singing the song about blood and killing your mother. And killing your mother. I want you to read it one more time by visualizing what exactly happened so that we understand how serious this is. He basically killed his mother, and his father woke up and saw his mother in a pool of blood. In a pool of blood. He tried to kill his own brother and his father, and he committed suicide. And 1 week exactly before that, what has he been, listening to? Has been listening to rock music. And it was filled with messages about blood and killing, your mother. All right, killing your mother. And this case is actually very interesting to any student who's studying psychopathology. You'll find it extremely shocking. I've not covered, all the details of the case. If you're interested, you can research more. Similarly, according to US News and World Report, October 28, 1985, and I want you to focus on the dates, all right? It's 1985. Or in 1985, like right now, compared to 1985, do you think the explicit, immoral, immodest, immature, psychotic, sexualized contents in the music, has it increased or decreased? Increased or decreased? Very clearly it has increased. Very clearly it has increased. Anyway, in 1985, a 14-year-old girl who was fascinated with pop music stabbed her mother to death. Stabbed her mother to death. All right, these are not fake cases. You can search it up. I've given references. Although these are extreme cases, they do show that music has a power to mentally derange a person and turn him or her violent. Okay, so we should not generalize. I'm not saying that everyone listening to music, will have similar effects. But at the same time, we should not ignore these cases. Okay, I've just covered 2 cases. There are a lot of cases. There are a lot of cases. There are books written on this particular topic. So there may not always be, simple one-to-one correlation between listening to music and committing violence, just as there is no simple one-to-one correlation between smoking and developing cancer. But the fact of the matter is that there is a direct connection in both cases. You can't deny this. In addition, smoking is not the only cause of lung cancer, although, it is one of the most prominent reasons. Neither is listening to music the only cause of youth violence. So there are multiple causes, but at the same time, we can clearly say that music plays a significant role. Music plays a what? Significant role. Now, we're going to get into a very important topic. That is subliminal messaging. Have you ever heard about the concept of subliminal messaging before? Subliminal messaging. Now, when it comes to subliminal messaging, there are a lot of conspiracy theories on the topic. So being a neutral researcher and being a Muslim, what we should be doing is, even if it supports our views, like we don't, accept inauthentic information. All right. So whenever we do research on topics, we should make sure the information we get is scientific and it should be authentic. Especially when it comes to these topics. I've seen a lot of people, using certain arguments just so that it can support their views. I've seen a lot of Muslims doing it, especially when it comes to Quran and science. Like they just, give a lot of these false statements. They just proclaim all these false statements and say that it's connected to the Holy Quran. It actually, has constructive, consequences or destructive consequences. Positive or negative? What do you think? Using inauthentic information to support your views, is it going to have positive effect or negative effect? It is definitely going to have negative effects. So we don't depend upon conspiracy theories, or we don't depend upon inauthentic, unscientific, pseudoscientific information. But this particular topic, subliminal messaging, it is scientifically proved. We'll look at the scientific studies with regards to it very soon, inshallah. Now, we're going to be looking at the role of music in subliminal seduction. Subliminal messages, what is it? Subliminal messages refer to communication directed to the subconscious mind. Now, the first time I became interested in this particular topic was when I was studying in my first year of college. We learned a theory called as classical conditioning. Does anyone know classical conditioning? How many of you have heard about classical conditioning? Almost all students of psychology would have heard about it. Classical conditioning. So when you're learning theories, you would have learned about classical conditioning theory, operant conditioning theory, latent conditioning theory, insight, learning theory, trial and error learning theory, insight learning theory, etc. Right? Okay. Now, when I was studying this particular topic, I was, trying to get into a bit more depth, and I found that news channels make use of, classical conditioning for the, sake of spreading hate. That is when I first came, across the concept of subliminal messaging, and it's like absolutely shocking. It's absolutely shocking. So subliminal messages are basically hidden suggestions that only your subconscious perceives. All right. So as we know, there are multiple levels of consciousness, and there are different aspects to it. I don't wish to go into that particular topic because it's a bit deeper, but we'll just cover the superficial elements only here, inshallah. So how is it achieved? It is achieved by projecting the messages so quickly or faintly that those messages are received by the listener at below the level of conscious awareness. Now, why, is it affecting the subconscious? Why doesn't it affect the conscious? Why doesn't it affect the conscious? We'll discuss that very soon. Now, the subliminal messages, there can be different types of subliminal messages. All right, it can be audio subliminals or visual subliminals. All right, audio subliminals or visual subliminals. Owing to its seductive power, music plays a superb role in disseminating both the audio and visual subliminal messages to the minds of people. Now, for example, words are uttered so quickly in a song that we do not consciously remember them, or words in a song are masked by musical tones or rhythms so that we do not consciously hear them. Okay, there are some songs, when we listen to their lyrics, we may not perceive, wrong or, immoral things. But if we dig a bit more deeper, we'll clearly see that they have been embedded with subliminal messages. And we'll clearly see, how it plays out. All right. In the case that I mentioned earlier, when with the child killed his mother, there was a subliminal message. Upon clearly analyzing the lyrics, we can see that it had a subliminal message. And there is a court case that happened with regards to it. To understand subliminal seduction, we have to know how our mind works. All right. I'll not be going to the depth of it, but just giving you a very general understanding. Now, consciousness can be categorized into three. How many of you know? What are these three? The conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind, right? Now, the conscious mind is actually the level of the mind, the level of consciousness that has the ability to distinguish between right and wrong, all right? But the main difference between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is that the subconscious mind doesn't have this ability. It accepts and stores all information that is presented to it. So when wrong values are passed on to the brain in the form of subliminal messages, they bypass our conscious mind capable of judging right from wrong, and they are stored directly into our subconscious memory and hence destroy the sense of morality. We need to understand this concept very well. If you understood this, say yes in the chat. So conscious mind has the ability to determine what is right and what is wrong, but subconscious mind doesn't have it. So subconscious, any message that is given to the subconscious mind, it readily accepts it. It readily accepts it. And through this, the sense of morality can be destroyed. And we need to understand this is not pseudoscience, all right? This is not pseudoscience. Yes, there are a lot of conspiracy theories. We don't need to depend on conspiracy theories, but we can depend on authentic data. The use of subliminal messages was first brought to the public attention in 1957 when James Vicary asserted that his company, he basically had a company termed, called the Subliminal Projection Co. All right. And he had developed a device that would flash a message on a movie screen every 5 seconds for just the smallest fraction of a second. A movie theater in New Jersey used the device for 6 weeks. The messages flashed were drink Coca-Cola and hungry. All right. So every 5 seconds, they would present this particular message: drink Coca-Cola and hungry with a question mark. Eat popcorn. All right, these were the two messages. And they did a statistical study. What basically happened here was the popcorn sales increased 58% and Coke sales increased by 18% on the days their respective subliminal messages were shown, compared to the days it wasn't shown. In general, there was public outrage at the invention because people considered that an attempt to manipulate the mind. Let me ask you, is this right or is it wrong? Is it ethical or is it unethical? What do you think? Is it ethical or unethical to use such subliminal messaging for corporate purposes? For corporate purposes, it is very clearly unethical, because you're not basically giving the person the choice to choose. You're basically sending the message into the subconscious and making them do it. Basically making them do it. There have been various examples of situations where the use of subliminal messages have been found in the media. For example, in the Christmas of 1973, several parents complained to the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, that a subliminal message, get it, right? What was the subliminal message? Type it in the chat. What was the subliminal message on the television? Two simple words, get it, right? Get it. It was used in a national TV commercial for children's game. As a result, the Premium Corporation of America, the maker of the game, voluntarily eliminated the commercial, claiming the subliminal presence was due to a misguided employee. Subliminal messages are used in music also. All right, so basically, they were basically using the subliminal message to increase, their sales of toys. Anyway, so subliminal messages are used in music also, just like they're used in television, movies, and other modes of communication. A good example of this, I'm going to give it now. But, a lot of research has not been done on it. If there are people who would like to research independently, full support. All right. It is LGBTQ activism and modern day films and animes. You would be shocked at the amount of subliminal messaging that is used in these cartoons and animes and films to propagate and promote LGBTQ. How many of you have been able to identify it? How many of you have been able to identify it? Little children's animes being incorporated or embedded with LGBTQ messages. Subhanallah. The more you research about it, you would be mind blown. You'll be mind blown. In fact, in music, they have an added advantage that the mesmerizing influence of music very efficiently masks and transmit the subliminal messages contained in it. So music basically has an emotional component. It, affects the emotionality or the emotional faculty of the brain. And we discussed the scientific studies proving that in the last class. So here, the subliminal messages are readily accepted. One of the problems with subliminal messages is that sometimes they are so quick, vague, and subtle that it is very difficult to moderate them. It is very difficult to moderate them. The effectiveness of subliminal messages has been shown experimentally in the various studies published in different scientific journals. Due to time constriction, we'll not be covering, the studies. If you're interested, take a screenshot of this particular slide and you can, understand more, inshallah. But what I'm finally trying to say is, like, this is an authentic concept and it is directly used by the music industry. It is used by the music industry. And one method employed in the music industry to create subliminals involves the placing of a short word or phrase under a drum beat. All right, this is a very clear technique. This method of placement is done using a conscious decision and action when recording the songs. Or let's say it's very clearly planned. And why do they place it usually under, a drum beat? Why? So that it does not get censored, so that it does not, get identified by the conscious mind. For example, in the first USAID case, we mentioned in the previous section, it was found that the word "do it" in the song was placed as a subliminal message. All right, "do it" was placed in the song as a subliminal message. Now, Pamela Marsden Capps notes the following. The court found that the words "do it" were a combination of the singer's exhalation on a track and Leslie guitar on another track. So this can be very clearly, identified or addressed by the, or found out by the conscious mind. And how did they place it? Did they place it as a word, like a direct "do it" lyric? No. It's very tactical. It's a combination of the singer's exhalation and, a Leslie guitar on another track. This is how they basically embedded it. There was, however, testimony indicating that the message was intentional, including the regularity of the words "do it" in a relationship to the drum beats where the words are located. The presence of a punch-in sound where the record button was pressed previous to a number of appearances of the words "do it." And computer analysis showing that the singer's breath occurred milliseconds after each "do it" on the record. And McCollum committed suicide after listening to Osborne's Suicide Solution. All right, Osborne's Suicide Solution. And in that same song, subliminal lyrics were involved. Terry Watkins states, the Institute for Bioacoustic Research, Incorporated, IBAR, was hired to evaluate Suicide Solution. The Suicide Solution is basically a song, and not surprisingly, they found subliminal lyrics that weren't involved in the copyright lead sheet. So basically, when you look at the lyrics of the songs, you won't be able to find these, words. But at the same time, if you dig a bit more deeper, like you very clearly, like with the help of, computers, if you do a computer analysis, like you will very clearly see these words. You'll very clearly see these words, but in lyrics, you won't be able to see it. The subliminal lyrics are sung at 1.5 times the normal rate of speech and are not grasped by the first-time listener. However, they claim the subliminal lyrics are audible enough that their meaning and true intent becomes clear after being listened to over and over again. Now, read the lyrics, read the subliminal message, like you will be shocked. All right, I have highlighted it in yellow. What are some of the hidden subliminal lyrics? Why try, get the gun and try it, shoot, and it's followed by a hideous laugher. Subhanallah. Why try, get the gun and try it, shoot, followed by a hideous laugher. This is not from the lyrics, but the subliminal message encoded or embedded in it was analyzed by the computer and found. Subhanallah. This is just one song. From what year? Like long years before. But right now, if you look at the music industry and if you look at the messages being spread, subhanallah, not just subliminal. Like you don't need to go into subliminal. You just need to look, like have a peripheral observation. Like it's very clear. They're supporting homosexuality. They're supporting violence. They're supporting suicide. They're supporting drugs. They're supporting alcohol. They're supporting everything. Like they're supporting everything immoral. everything immoral, subhanallah. And still, like, we allow it. Like, this has become normalized. This has become normalized, like in every function. If they're playing a song that has really, really disgusting contents, like, nobody's going to say anything. It has become so normalized, and everyone has got so desensitized to it so much so that they have become demoralized, so that they have become demoralized. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Whether it's East or West, musicians and singers who are the apostles of Satan intentionally or unintentionally introduce subliminal relics in both the classical and pop music. In both classical and pop music, those subliminal messages embedded in music about promiscuity, drugs, revolt against the elders, religious traditions ultimately affect the behavior of their listeners and destroy the moral fabric of the society within a few decades. There is no doubt in this. There is no doubt in this. The more you research about it, the more clear it becomes. The more clear it becomes. That is why we always say it's better not to listen to it. All right. There are people who go to, certain scholars, trying to find loopholes within the mas'ala or the fatwa that is given by the general, scholars. By the general scholars, they give a lot of excuses, saying that we can listen to this music, we can listen to that music. But usually, when we give such a loophole to the youth, do you think they're just going to listen to all these positive materials? Hell no. You're basically opening up the floodgate, and they're going to use this as an excuse to listen to all the filth that is out there. All the filth that is out there. Now, the next topic we're going to be discussing is the role of music in suicide among young people. But since we don't have time to cover this particular topic, we'll not be going to that, but I'll just be swiftly moving to it. All right, I'll just be swiftly moving across it. So, just to start off the discussion, let me ask you: is there a relationship between music and suicides? Is there a relationship between music and suicides? The desensitization has become so normal that when I ask this to certain people, they will say no, obviously no. Like, they will just think that this is just some biased religious statement. No, this is very clearly proved by psychology. It's very clearly proved by psychology. A research that was published in 1992, it clearly showed that the greater the airtime devoted to country music, the greater the white American suicide rate. Anyway, so there are multiple researchers. These are all the researchers that was compiled. But since we don't have time, we will not be going into that. But there's a particular hadith, and with this hadith and looking at certain few cases, we'll end today's discussion, inshallah. The Prophet ﷺ said in one of his traditions, soon there will be people from my ummah who will drink wine, calling it by other than its real name. There will be instruments of music and singing on their heads. This is quite surprising. This is quite surprising. I mean, think about it. He's saying that there will be instruments of music and singing on their heads. Like, what is the first picture that comes into your mind? What is the first picture that comes into your mind? Headset is very clear. It's very clear. If you do a contextual analysis, like if you go to that time, like, nobody would have ever thought that there would be music devices on their heads, because the usual musical instruments were all very big, and they were, played by the hands, etc. Like, it's quite impossible for a person to think that there will be music and singing on their heads. Like, it's a very clear prophecy, subhanAllah. It's a very clear prophecy. And they will listen to female singers, and Allah will cleave the earth under them and turn them into apes and swine, subhanAllah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Hence, one of the signs of the end of times is that people will carry musical instruments on their heads. Today, when we watch, people walking with headphones on their heads, playing the music, we see nearly 1,400 years of old prophecy coming true. Old prophecy coming true. There are multiple researches with regards to this as well, but due to time constriction, we are not going to go to that. But this is the last subject we're going to be discussing, and that is this. Lessons from biographies of singers and musicians who died without, repentance, If you look at a lot of these musicians, if you look at their lives, these singers and actors and artists, like, we'll notice that their lives are filled with corruption that is far beyond our imagination. Their self-destructive lifestyle comprises of abuse of narcotics, sexual permissiveness, alcoholism, nihilism, hedonism, insubordination, and anarchy. Like, many of them die in unpleasant circumstances. For example, Van Gogh. How many of you know Van Gogh? How many of you know Van Gogh? Van Gogh. Anyone who knows classical music will know Van Gogh. He committed suicide because the art he devoted his life to could not give him any true happiness or mental peace. Michelangelo. How many of you know Michelangelo? Michelangelo. He was actually the creator of the statue of David, and who drew religious pictures on the walls of Sistine Chapel, was noted for his love for the same sex. Michelangelo's homoeroticism is apparent in his poetry. He also committed suicide. The German philosopher and poet Friedrich Nietzsche perceived music as so essential to human life that, according to him, music could make life worth living. He considered music as an attempt to give form and beauty to the dark, chaotic forces in the soul to make them serve a higher purpose. This is Nietzsche. This is Nietzsche, subhanallah. Subhanallah. And he was basically insane for the last 10 years of his life. He was insane for the last 10 years of his life. The musical genius, Beethoven. How many of you know Beethoven? How many of you know Beethoven? Beethoven was so arrogant that people could not stand his rude behavior. And when we speak to musical teachers, like I do remember while I was studying in school, we had a period like music period. How many of you had that particular period? Music period. Music period. And I do specifically remember, they basically idolize these early musicians. Beethoven was, taught to us like he was some prophet, a great guy, an amazing guy. But if you do a clear-cut analysis of his life, we see the clear opposite. We see the clear opposite. Like nobody could stand his rude behavior. He had several romantic attachments with women, but all of them ended into a fiasco, and he never married. He even made several unsuccessful attempts to committing suicide during his life. The despair and emotional disturbance in the lives of music genius Elvis Presley can be seen from the fact that he died because of alcoholism. He died because of alcoholism. Several other music stars died because of drug abuse, including Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones, Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison of the Doors, Jim Harden, Frankie Lymon, etc. All right. So you just need to do a general analysis of the lives of the earlier musicians. We see that it was completely a disaster. If you do an analysis of these musicians of today, you will see the same trend. They might look really happy on the outside, but they're not really happy on the inside. If you look at certain counseling cases of the celebrities, like you will clearly see this. How many of them are suffering from depression? How many of them are suffering from depression? Subhanallah. Subhanallah. إن الذين يحبون أن تعيش الفاحشة في الذين آمنوا لهم عذاب أليم في الدنيا والآخرة والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in Surah An-Nur, verily those who like that the crime of illegal sexual relations or corruption should be propagated among those who believe, they will have a painful torment in this world and in the hereafter. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم. And be not like those who forgot Allah, so He made them forget their own souls. If you forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will forget your own souls. If you forget the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are going to have a really depressed life. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ. Whoever deviates from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is going to have a depressed life. This is a verse in the Holy Quran. These are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator. He knows us more than we know ourselves. So my dear brothers and sisters, without taking more time, let me conclude. We really got to understand how dangerous this stuff is. And it makes me really, really sad, really sad when I see my own brothers and sisters, our own age category, the youth, in Islamic colleges, wearing hijabs and having beards, dancing up and down to music that has filthy content. During these college celebrations, these Onam celebrations, these holy festivals, subhanallah, it's really, really sad. It's really, really sad. And then understanding that these songs, it has direct effect on them. It's a massive demoralization project. We got to understand this, my brothers and sisters. Subhanallah. Allah al-Musta'an. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them all. Try to protect yourself as much as you can from all this filth, especially if you're using social media. If you're watching these reels and TikToks, a lot of the songs that are played in the background has a direct impact on you. And I hope you clearly have understood it and accepted the fact that it has psychological effect. It has psychological effect. So let's not deny this. Let's not live a life of delusion, hallucinating and trying to reject the fact that all these demoralizing tools are being, used onto us by certain industries with clear-cut agendas. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Allah al-Musta'an. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. With that, we end. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, protect our brothers and sisters, protect our parents, and protect the next generation. The next generation, because sincerely and honestly, when I think about the next generation, my own children, our own children that's going to come, like they're going to be living in a world that is completely demoralized, completely demoralized. If we don't stand up as a society, if we don't stand up as a society, a change cannot be expected. Change cannot be expected. Just like Gandhi used to say, the change you want to see around yourselves should start with you. So let's start with ourselves. Let's, pledge to ourselves that we will not expose ourselves to such filth, And sadly, now I see a lot of parents, being concerned of this. But when it comes to their children, like they tell the children not to watch these filthy movies and listen to these songs. But at the same time, they listen to it. How do you expect your children to follow while you yourself do not follow? Children do not listen. They observe, they imitate, they model. So be a good model for them. Be a good father and be a good mother. Protect yourself from this filth and you will see your children doing the same, inshallah. With that, I conclude. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا إننا نسألك حبك وحب من يحبك وحب عمل قرب إلى حبك. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
MashaAllah, such an amazing, wonderful, beneficial session. Got a lot of new information. Jazakumullah khairan, Brother Wafi. Now I would like to call Brother Shabez for the conclusion talk.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Am I audible?
Yes, Alhamdulillah, you are.
Okay, so Alhamdulillah, we had a really amazing and beneficial session. It was really required and needed. I would like to thank Brother Wafi for this amazing session. Jazakallah khair. It was really beneficial to all of us. May Allah let all of us practice what we have learned today in this session. And may Allah protect everyone in this meeting as well as the whole Ummah from music and its ill effects. And may Allah may Allah make us leave every aspect of music from our lives and make us steadfast on this. Now I would like to thank all the participants who joined this meeting. Jazakallah khair. May Allah accept all of your time and reward you all for each and every second. Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair to all the volunteers in this meeting who helped in conducting today's session. May Allah accept your efforts and may Allah let you do more work for Deen and for the sake of Allah. I would like to thank Sister Atiba for the amazing introductory talk, and I would like to thank Sister Shifa for moderating this whole session. Jazakallah khair. And again, thank you for each and every participant for attending this session and being attentive in this. May Allah bless all of us and increase our knowledge and let us practice what we learn. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا